Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today, Convert Smarter, Not Harder. Please let me know through the chat button if you can't hear me or don't see the slides now or anytime during the presentation, and we'll sort out the technical problem. We will be recording the session this morning, and we will share the video afterwards. Our host today is Ash Al-Hasham, the VP of Sales here at Scaled Inference. He's a veteran of the technology market and has helped leading companies to successfully adopt new technologies to solve meaningful business problems. And he will be telling you today about reinforcement learning and how to use that for optimization. During our webinar today, Ash will be running a couple of polls and he will take questions at the end. So with that, let's get started.
Thank you, Christina. Hello, everyone. It's great to be leading this webinar with you all today, Convert Smarter, Not Harder, an introduction to using reinforcement learning for optimization. Today's talk is meant for growth for teams with a growth mandate at digital businesses or for digital arms of traditional businesses. Really folks across marketing or product or growth teams who are responsible for improving any sort of business metric. We're going to speak today about reinforcement learning, which is a form of machine learning, and we will not be getting too into the weeds today. So again, if you are a data scientist or an engineer or really want to understand the mechanics of how reinforcement learning works under the hood, please get in touch with us directly or stay tuned for a future webinar where we will provide more detail about how the system actually works. But for the purposes of today's conversation, we're really going to be focused on a few things at a more abstract level and a more commercial level as well. So again, the purpose of today's webinar is to help marketing, product, and growth teams learn about recent advances in reinforcement learning and how it's reshaping the conversion rate optimization world. In order to fulfill that purpose, we're going to cover an agenda that starts with the current state of optimization. We will dive into then converting smarter with reinforcement learning, with some of the companies that are kind of leading the charge with reinforcement learning powered optimization are doing to benefit from these recent advances in technology. And we will then take a look at a few examples of reinforcement learning in action so that we can properly wrap our heads around the benefits of reinforcement learning and how it actually works when the rubber meets the road. This webinar should last well under an hour, so that we will save plenty of time, hopefully, for Q&A. So please submit your questions throughout the webinar. Christina, my colleague, will be there to potentially answer some of the questions in real time, and then others we will table for the end of this conversation so that we can dive through them live. And throughout the webinar, we will also be administering a couple of polls throughout. So please have your keyboards and mouses ready as we ask you a few things, and we'd love to get your input on on some of these questions we ask. All right, so the current state of optimization. If you are in the world of marketing, product, or growth, you are no doubt familiar with this concept of A/B testing. Well, over the last decade, the accessibility of A/B testing has led to the proliferation of available A/B testing solutions. And with that, we've seen a rapid rise of experimentation for digital businesses. A/B tests are easier than ever to run, and we're seeing diminishing returns as a result of that proliferation of this approach to doing business. With what we're hearing a lot in the market actually is folks tell us that early on when they first launched their A/B testing programs, wins were easy, fast to come by. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit, proverbially speaking, that was able to really help drive improvements to their metrics. But as A/B testing programs within organizations become more mature, and as our understanding of user experience as a market matures, we are finding that more and more A/B tests end in statistical ties. As many as 80 to 90% of the A/B tests many folks are seeing or overseeing are ending in these statistical ties, which executives, of course, often will consider to be massive losses for businesses. These, again, A/B testing programs and practices take a lot of human and monetary resources, so it can be quite devastating when you're running 2 successful tests for every 10 you run. Aside from the fact that A/B testing is hard, the low-hanging fruit being gone is one of the main reasons why this is the case. And contextual wins versus uncontextual wins is something we're going to dive into as kind of an uncharted territory with respect to how we can continue to get more out of optimization programs. I want to take a quick moment to take a poll of the audience, so please get your keyboards and mouses ready. Curious, of the A/B tests that you've run in the last 1 year, what percentage of them have been successful? We're going to go ahead and give you about 15 to 20 seconds to submit your answers, and we'll review the results with you. All right. It looks like votes are coming in, and it's a tie for A and B. We have 50% of participants responding that fewer than 10% or less than 10% of the A/B tests they've run in the last year have been successful. And the remainder said that 11 to 25% have been successful. So squarely within what the market research is showing, and definitely explains why a lot of us are here today and investing in or investigating different approaches to optimization. The second part, or this two-pronged approach to optimization that we, I'm sure, all hear a lot about is personalization. And now, personalization is a term that's been around just as long as A/B testing. However, the efficacy of personalization has left most of us disappointed. And why is that? Well, personalized shopping experiences can reduce acquisition costs by up to 50% and the efficiency of marketing spend by 30%, according to a recent report by McKinsey. So it's not that personalization is a dead end or snake oil. It does and can work. However, what we're finding is that the problem is not so much with personalization itself as it is how we think about personalization and how we implement it. So typically what we're seeing is that personalized experiences are oftentimes really just cheap parlor tricks that may serve to impress in demo environments, but really very likely to do very unlikely to actually improve metrics. In many cases, the tailored experiences that marketers customize really fall flat with users at best, and at worst can really serve to creep them out. This visual on the right-hand side of your screen shows marketing email and open and click rates in the United States by degree of personalization. So on the far left side, you see the rates for not personalized experiences, and on the far right side, you see the click-through rates and open rates for personalized experiences. And really, what this report by Iron Paper found is that personalization has little effect, and in some cases actually has detrimental effect to your marketing efforts. Now, one example that I'm quite fond of, I know a lot of businesses, particularly B2B businesses, are kind of fond of this implementing this approach to personalization, is calling you out by your name or your business's name when you visit their site. And I'm really personally not a big fan of this experience for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is creepy. I don't like to be reminded of the fact that my information is all over the internet. It reminds me of some of the big brother elements of capitalism and the society we live in today. But that's just me personally. I know a lot of people probably share my opinion, but beyond that, what value does this personalization really offer? Aside from knowing my name, which might be seen as cute or funny or cool at best, you're really not speaking to me as an individual. You're not personalizing experiences in any meaningful way. So this is an example of personalization done poorly, where it's really not adding value and it's potentially also serving to creep people out. This, aside from a couple of other things that we'll cover a little bit later in this webinar, have left people pretty underwhelmed with respect to what personalization can do for their businesses. With that said, we'd like to administer another poll. Are you actively using personalization in your marketing or growth efforts today? And again, we'll give you about 15 seconds to submit your answers. Sorry about that. We continued without audio there. The survey results came in, and 100% of members of the audience reported back that they are not using personalization, which is consistent with market findings, where we're seeing that people are reporting that personalization, while it can provide some benefit to conversion rates, just isn't worth the squeeze. It's too much effort and too much time, frankly. And we're going to explore this in a little bit more detail throughout. So in sum, the challenges with the current state of optimization can be wrapped up into a few key concepts. And one term that we've heard a lot lately is this idea of the tyranny of averages. And I think that describes the challenges or limitations with A/B testing quite well. Testing on a whole is great in that it, in comparison to the alternative of doing nothing or making decisions with your gut. So if you want to deliver the experience that is best on average, you will improve conversion rates overall relative to just taking a wild guess. However, the challenge here is that testing itself is oblivious to contextual wins and losses. In other words, the best variant as measured by what's best on average will win. And this results in companies losing opportunities to understand customer context and pain points and deliver true data-driven, personalized experiences. A good way to nail this or bring this idea home is this idea of an ice cream test. And so let's imagine for a moment that you're an elementary school teacher and you have a classroom of, say, 20 students, and you have 3 flavors of ice cream that you want to potentially give to your students. Variation A, or you suspect that chocolate is going to be the favorite, but you also have vanilla and strawberry in your back pockets, just in case large segments of your student population actually turn out to prefer strawberry or vanilla. So you conduct a poll and you find that 60% of your students prefer chocolate, validating your hypothesis that chocolate is the best. Wonderful job. So what do? Well, in the case of A/B testing, what you would do is you would actually deliver you would deliver chocolate to all of your students, even though only 60% prefer it. The folks who like vanilla, 30% of your student population, and the folks who like strawberry, 10% of your student population, will actually get a suboptimal flavor because that is what the majority of the students wanted. That's really what A/B testing is in a nutshell. It's delivering the experience that's best. At least you're not disappointing 70% of students or more, but you are delivering a suboptimal experience that is best overall on average. Aside from that, some other challenges with A/B testing is that testing is usually slow and inconclusive. A lot of research has been done around A/B testing and how it compares to a certain class of bandits called multi-armed bandits in the past. And it finds that for things like headline testing, you actually want to use multi-armed bandits because it delivers far quicker results. There are many challenges with multi-armed bandits, and they've actually been proven to not be effective in real-world settings, but that's a topic for another day. Because what we do is not actually a multi-armed bandit, but rather a class of reinforcement learning called contextual bandits. Aside from that, testing can be misleading. A big challenge that we're solving and seeing a lot in the market is that tests produce static results. If variation A is the winner in May, then we're going to probably roll that out as the version of our experience that we deliver to customers throughout the rest of the year. And things change. Your market changes, your product changes, your advertising campaigns may change. So to deliver a static experience to dynamic audiences and for dynamic products can be risky. Some challenges with personalization that we're seeing is that changes in traffic or user behavior are not adequately managed by existing solution. And what ends up happening is that for every personalized experience you deliver, you're constantly having to maintain that experience over time, which becomes a nightmare potentially for your product organization, but also for your customer support organization, and leaves you also exposed to a lot of risk. And in addition to that, data integrity issues really prevent organizations from optimizing with confidence. And this can become particularly challenging for personalization because, again, the risks here and the difficulty of managing multiple experiences compounds the challenge and risk. So let's talk a little bit about converting smarter with reinforcement learning. And the reason we talk about this idea of converting smarter with reinforcement learning is because the accepted truth over the last few years with respect to A/B testing or optimizing metrics with your business has been to do what? Well, it's been to work harder, to run more tests. With, again, those proliferation of A/B testing tools, particularly ones that are front-end integrations and make it really simple and straightforward to implement and test, we're finding that a lot of folks are running tests haphazardly and without much thought. But they know that if they run 10 tests, maybe 1 or 2 will win. And that has created a poor culture around optimizing and a lot of wasted effort, a lot of wasted ideas. So we talk about this idea of converting smarter with reinforcement learning, basically as a way to deliver not the right experience to all of your users, because on average, users are relatively easy to understand after you've run a few A/B tests. But the benefit of reinforcement learning is that we can deliver continuous, autonomous, and contextual optimization, delivering personalized experiences to people based on what they are responding to at different times, and we continue to adapt experiences over time as well. What we get from this is that there's no real single winner most of the time, and that's not what this is about. Really what this is about is delivering the best experience to each user at any given time based on what will actually convert, not a hunch about what might impress them. And again, for the purpose of today's webinar, we're not going to dive into the technical details about the algorithms that we do use, but at a high level, the type of algorithm that we do use are called algorithms that we use are called contextual bandits. And this is all about being able to make contextual decisions, as we described earlier, and take key contexts and segments and allow those things to emerge out of the process on its own. You don't actually define segments. They emerge on its own. The machine finds them and looks for the correlations between segments, contexts, and variations. So how is this different from A/B testing? Well, the business benefits are really strong and pretty clear. Number one, because we're not working harder, we're not running as many tests as possible at any given time. We're just picking a few strategic optimization projects and running them and having multiple experiences that are tailored and speak to the different cohorts within your business. You spend more time ideating and coming up with more strategic test ideas that are more likely to move the needle. Fewer of your ideas are wasted, since you don't have to deliver an experience that is best on average. You're just delivering experiences that speak coherently and compellingly to segments of your audience. This is autonomous and it is continuous, meaning you don't have to worry about the heavy lifting and the manual lifting, managing personalized experiences over time. This is something that we've seen a lot with customers that have done personalization in the past by way of pulling a bunch of data from their data management platform or their CRM, and then, for example, delivering a certain experience to customers that are in process inside of Salesforce. Well, what happens when those customers are no longer in a sales cycle? You have to go in and manually update the experience that you deliver to them. Otherwise, you risk delivering the wrong experience. So the benefit of this approach to optimization is that you no longer have to worry about the manual updates. The system does it for you automatically and autonomously. This has the secondary benefit of giving you a deeper understanding of your customers by understanding what segments respond best to which variants. And overall, the most important thing, arguably, is that we actually improve metrics far more than what you're able to see with A/B testing alone. I want to share a couple of visuals that really kind of bring this point home very well. And this is a pretty busy set of visuals, and I want to explain this to the audience, and we can also take your questions about it at the end if any of this is unclear, because I do understand there's a lot going on here. So what you're seeing here is A/B testing pitted against our approach of continuous optimization through segment learning. On the top visual is an A/B test that is run over a period of time, about 2 months. And the bottom visual is that same essential optimization project run in parallel, but with our approach of continuous optimization. And the goal here is to improve conversion rates. And so you'll find that in the top variation, the A/B test, we have, for both of these variations, we have 17 what we call actions or variants. Think of these as 17 different experiences that users can possibly go through. So you're running an ABN test with 17 experiences on the top, and you're running an optimization project with 17 possible experiences at the bottom. Now with the A/B test, you'll see that these gray areas represent the standard error regions. So this is basically saying if you're within the standard error region, the test is inconclusive. There's not enough confidence in our data that shows that one of these variations is better than the others. And you can see here that pretty solidly, this is a tie. There is not one variant that outperforms the others in a meaningful enough way to call the test over 2 months. So we've let this test run its course. On the other hand, in the bottom, with reinforcement learning powered optimization, what you're seeing is this same exact set of variants actually does deliver results. And more specifically, what this test was able to deliver was a 12.59% increase in sales conversions relative to the baseline. Now, the baseline is represented by this blue area down here. And you can see that about throughout the entire experiment, for the most part, minus one little blip, we're delivering about 40% of users to the baseline. And this is important because the way this product works is that we're constantly comparing these variants against a control group. So we're delivering a set number of experiences to that control. But when you really start to look at the very end of this time period, what you're seeing is there's a lot of purple and a lot of brown. And what this purple and brown represents is the amount of time, or the amount of, the number of users that are being delivered a personalized experience based on the segment information that we're able to relate them to. More specifically, this means that users really liked the control group, the purple variation, and the brown variation. Those are the winners in this optimization project run by Reinforcement Learning. And because we were able to identify those as winners, we could take the other 14 variants, scrap them, and then build a new hypothesis off of the results of this experiment and start over again and seek even more improvements based on our new understanding of our customers and what they liked. Another key differentiator or point that's important to talk about with respect to benefits of reinforcement learning over A/B testing is sustaining growth, particularly against invalidated tests. So again, if you've been running A/B tests for some time, you've probably run into scenarios like this. You run an A/B test, the test is a pretty clear winner. When you call the test, you have a 10% increase over your baseline. So you implement the variant that beats the baseline by 10%, expecting a 10% increase in revenue or whatever metric you're tracking to sustain for the next few months to a year. But you're surprised all of a sudden when an executive asks you why we're not actually seeing that 10% improvement in that metric that we were measuring a few months later. So puzzled, you go back and you take a look at the numbers. What's going on here? And what you might find is something similar to this. And we see this all of the time with A/B tests. So just to walk you through what we're seeing here, this is another experiment or an A/B test on the top compared with an optimization project powered by scaled inference on the bottom. This is another experiment that's run over 2 months. But the goal here is actually different. This is a cancellation experiment. So the goal is to actually reduce cancellation. The lowest conversion rate, or the lowest cancellation rate, we should say, wins. And you can see here that we started this A/B test in early April. By the end of April, early May, it's pretty clear. And we have enough confidence here that we have statistical significance. It's pretty clear that the orange variant is the best performing variant. But then something happens right around the time you call this test. And this is exactly what happened with this customer. Orange started underperforming relative to 3 other variants. Only a month later, it was actually the fourth best variant with respect to reducing cancellations. Now again, had you rolled out the orange variant to all of your users, you would now be in a precarious position where you're not delivering the best experience and your cancellation rate is higher than you would have anticipated. With reinforcement learning, as seen on the bottom here, you can see that orange does perform well, very well actually, and we continue to deliver an orange experience to a lot of users, but not all users. Actually, some users really prefer or really responded well to this red variant. This red variant on the A/B test, you can see, is probably your 6th best performing variant out of 7. So not doing very well on its own. But again, when paired with specific segments who really appreciate that type of messaging, find it compelling, a combination of delivering the baseline, the blue, the orange variant, and the red variant is going to lead to the best cancellation rate possible. And in this case, we were actually able to reduce cancellations by just over 3.5% relative to the baseline by delivering personalized, contextually segmented experiences. So let's now dive into what reinforcement learning in action actually looks like. So this chart is actually typical in head-to-head comparison against a real-world A/B tests, an A/B test. And we ran 3 early customers through these types of experiences, and we found in those head-to-head comparisons pretty consistently anywhere between an 8 to 10x metric improvement over A/B testing. And this spans multiple industries, multiple use cases. And the benefit of this, again, is that deep understanding. It's not just the fact that reinforcement learning delivers better results than A/B testing. It's that now you understand what segments exist in your audience in a meaningful way, beyond just what your analytics tool can provide. And then you start to build catered and tailored experiences to those folks rather than doing it the other way around, which is more the traditional way of having done personalization in the past, which again just has lower efficacy. A couple of examples of different use cases and the types of value gain we were able to see relative to A/B testing. We worked with a large media business with about 100 million monthly active users, and we saw relative to their A/B test that they were running about a 9x improvement by using reinforcement learning. Another business with 200 million monthly active users saw massive improvements to their sign-up rate relative to A/B testing. And another business, a digital retailer that was mobile first, with about 12 million monthly users, saw their purchase rate improve by about 250% relative to A/B testing. But let's actually walk through some, again, real-world examples to walk you through the storyboard of how we think about this and what the market is seeing. And this will be a combination of hypothetical and real-world examples, and we'll try to walk you through the thinking and behind all of these. So let's start off with a fictitious company called Acme Core. And Acme is a ride-sharing company. In other words, a two-sided business, two-sided network that really aims to pair folks who are heading to a certain location with people who are willing to drive them there for a fee. Pretty simple business model, and as any two-sided network works, there are vicious and virtuous cycles. The more drivers you get, the more passengers you can get. And the more passengers you can get, the more drivers you can get. And the fewer drivers you have, the fewer passengers will want to ride with you and wait 10 minutes or more to be paired with someone who's heading in a certain direction. We all have busy lives. So there are virtuous and vicious cycles with these types of businesses. And the focus here, the focus of today's exercise or kind of case study is this idea of driver acquisition. So driver acquisition teams exist at a lot of these ride-sharing companies, and are going to be focused on increasing the number of people who see the driving ads, get to the website overall, and the driver landing pages in particular. And then once people hit these landing pages, increase the number of conversions that happen. And this is what the typical website experience for Acme Core driver landing pages look like. Very simple, straightforward. Give us some information and we'll get you on your way to a background check and all of the different steps that we have to go through in order to authorize you as a driver for our service. So in this control group, it's pretty straightforward. There's no really special, compelling, personalized experiences that we're delivering. It's just, here's what you got to do. Give us what we need. So in this example, let's assume that Acme has actually done a lot of research and found that their drivers care about three things: money, safety, and flexibility. So what Acme Core may have wanted to do with an A/B test is run an A/B test to figure out what messaging resonates best with most users on average. And they might not have found anything, and they might have called that test a failure since it's all over, the results are all over the place, and there's no statistically significant winner. So they go back to this plain old language, and that's fine. But with reinforcement learning, what we're able to do is deliver these different experiences to different users in order to see what groups with what attributes respond well to what variants, what experiences. So we may have a version of our landing page that highlights how much money you can make in your first month. For those more safety conscious users, we may have something that speaks to how safe our app is. Maybe some colorful blog posts and kind of testimonials from drivers. And then for those folks who really crave and need flexibility in their lives, maybe students or folks with full-time jobs who just need a little bit of side money, who have some apprehension about potentially signing up for another job, we may want to really kind of assuage their concerns about how much time and commitment this will take from them. And again, what Acme Core may find is that there is no one clear winner. That different people prefer different things, but what Acme Core will almost certainly see is that these different experiences, when paired with the right segments of your audience, will deliver better results than having a standard one-size-fits-all landing page overall. Let's move on to our next customer story or example. And we want to talk about a company named Agoda. For those of you not familiar with Agoda, Agoda is one of the world's largest online travel agencies. They're owned by the Priceline Group. They primarily operate in Southeast Asia, one of the largest online travel agencies in Southeast Asia and also the world, very closely affiliated with Booking.com, their European counterpart. And similar to Acme, Agoda is a two-sided marketplace as well. They make money by pairing people who are listing properties with people who are looking for places to stay, short-term rentals, most often the case. And as such, there are certain peculiar challenges that they are faced with. Well, what do they say on their website? What is the experience that they deliver to users? Do they speak to the fact that, hey, we have all these awesome places and they're available right now and you should book them straight away? Or should they speak to the fact that, hey, a fraction of you, perhaps a small fraction, are really looking to potentially list the properties? Or should they speak to the cost-conscious consumers who really aren't in need of staying somewhere, and certainly not necessarily through Agoda, unless they have an economic incentive to do that? These things can become difficult to manage. And again, managing personalized experiences for a business at scale can be challenging in its own right. So what we might be able to do with a business like this is deliver a few experiences. For example, a baseline where it's just your normal page, all of the different things you can do. You can rent, you can host, select your dates, sign up for today, look at deals, or look at places. We may throw in another experience that is geared towards cost-conscious users, with the hypothesis being that there are cost-conscious users, and let's let the system identify who the cost-conscious users are and pair them with this variant. And then we may also have other users altogether, again, a small subset of our users, but nonetheless an important segment of our two-sided marketplace, who aren't really looking to rent places, but rather are looking to list their homes. And this may be very easy to identify folks who are looking to list their properties. It may be people who came to you from a certain UTM campaign, a Google search for listing home for rent, for example. But it could also be a little bit more nuanced. It may be that people who have certain IP addresses that belong to property managers, or certain logged in users who have a history of listing properties that you deliver this experience to. The idea here is to, again, just shorten the funnel overall so that you improve conversion rates. And what you're able to do with reinforcement learning is deliver these personalized experiences, let the machine figure out when and how to deliver them, and change that over time as everything changes dynamically. And the last example we'll give here before we summarize and turn it over to Q&A is an online retail example. And we wanted to actually take it back to one of our earliest customers here, Teespring. This is a real world example. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Teespring, they're a digital retailer, e-commerce platform with doing over 100 million in revenue. And they have a rich optimization program and culture that's existed ahead of working with Scaled Inference. They've been running A/B tests for many, many years, digitally native business that is quite tech savvy and optimization savvy. So when we started working with Teespring, they really wanted to do a couple of things. They wanted to optimize for revenue. And the trade-offs that they had as a business that is trying to really maximize digital revenue is, on one hand, we can encourage users to spend more time browsing the site in order to maximize cart value. However, if they do that, they'll risk cart abandonment. Right? The more time you spend on the site, the more likely you are to get distracted and do something else and not buy altogether. The alternative is to push users to check out more quickly in order to reduce abandonment risk, which of course could potentially sacrifice additional dollar spend. So lower average order value for a more sure deal versus a less sure deal for larger average order value. That is the trade-off that we're considering. And we're trying to maximize overall revenue by identifying really what segments respond more favorably to each experience with this reinforcement learning driven approach. So we ran an A/B test, it's effectively an A/B test, optimization project as we would call it, where we had two variations that were presented to users. Variation A was the classic "you may also like" variation. There's other stuff here. Keep looking, keep browsing. Variation B is, all right, let's get this money while we can. Let's proceed to checkout and get that revenue. We started running this optimization project, and over time, the machine figured out that there were a couple of clear, distinguishable characteristics of segment that described what users were more likely to convert better with and improve overall conversion rates. One learned segment that we paired pretty quickly with the first variation was that people who were coming from a fast connection speed and on a large screen really responded well to this "you may also like" language. On average, they ended up buying more, spending more money with Teespring, which turned out very well, and relatively few dropped off. However, if you were coming from a slow connection speed device, probably an older phone in particular, or any sort of device with a small screen, really what the machine learned is we should move you to checkout as quickly as possible. We cannot risk having you browse around and get frustrated or distracted. We really need you to purchase. And by pairing these different segments with these variations, what we were able to do is improve pretty much every metric that we were counting, or every metric that we were tracking for Teespring, and generate a tremendous amount of additional revenue and improve conversion rates as well. So in summary, A/B testing is limited to what's best on average and leaves you susceptible to changing conditions, changing product conditions, changing market conditions, changing advertising campaigns. And while it is better than the alternative of doing nothing, it is simply not the best solution out there today, given recent advances in machine learning, more specifically in reinforcement learning. Second, non-contextual personalization. This is, again, taking that data from your CRM or your DMP and making assumptions about showing different classes of folks different things based on that gut feeling, can be really ineffective, sometimes creepy even, and also difficult to maintain, particularly for companies that operate at massive scale. And third point is that reinforcement learning does offer a way to do both autonomous and continuous personalization at scale. So it is a better approach to optimizing key metrics for your business, and we certainly hope that this webinar will help you understand the why and how behind it. With that said, we're going to wrap up and turn it over to Q&A. So I believe you all have access to the chat box, and feel free to, if you have any questions, go ahead and submit, and we will do our best to answer.
So we have a question that was submitted during the webinar, Ash, that we could take as our first one. I've been running A/B testing using a platform. How could I use AMP AI to see and compare with A/B testing in a chat? With A/B testing, sorry, that was their end of their question.
That's a great question. So the question is, how do I compare? How can I compare results from A/B testing to AMP.ai? And the short answer here is, the way our product works, we actually run essentially an A/B test against the status quo with every one of our optimization projects. And we do that, typically there are two scenarios that come kind of rise out of that. The first scenario is, you're not doing A/B testing, and what we're doing is we're running an optimization project on one hand, and then we're running an A/B test for that optimization project relative to your baseline. And this is what we use to let you know how much improvement or lack of improvement we're able to deliver relative to your current baseline. Again, and that's where all these numbers are coming from. Hey, this is AMP.ai relative to the baseline. But we can also take that same kind of framework and use it to compare AMP.ai, our optimization engine, compared to an A/B test that you're already running. And what we would just do is essentially there will be multiple baselines or whatever variation performed best in that experiment would be that baseline that we would compare against. And of course there are technical nuances to this, so we're happy to, if you have more questions, follow up with you after the webinar and give you more of a detailed answer.
Thanks, Ash. We have another question from an attendee. Where does the user attribution data come from? Is it all from our data from logged in users, or is there anything for logged out users?
So we get data from a variety of sources. Number one, we have our own data that we pull from, like, for example, URL headers that allow us to capture very basic data, about 30 some odd attributes. For example, device type, browser, geo, a couple of very basic things. Pardon us. Very basic things, and we can share those with you as well in a conversation if you are interested in learning more. Beyond that, we have two other data sources that we're able to pull from. One is, number one, and most importantly, your own data. So any data that you use that you find pertinent about your users, that you're willing to pass to scaled inference, will hugely impact our ability to uncover these segments and pair them with variations that really matter. Number three is we also have a partnership with a data provider, Nielsen, that gives us access to many hundreds of attributes beyond what we're able to pull automatically. Things like income level or age group, and many more attributes that really allow us to give better data and find more relationships between variants and segments, but also give our customers a much richer data set to kind of hypothesize and build future optimization projects off of. So if you're really interested in slicing and dicing your data in as many ways as possible and really getting a deep understanding of your user, we would highly recommend that you leverage our Nielsen data partnership.
Great, thank you, Ash. Is implementation difficult, and are you able to work with us if we prefer to host server side?
So is implementation difficult is the first part of that question. Typically, generally speaking, no. We're a set of APIs, and there are a couple of different ways to implement our solution, some being easier than others. Now, we offer a front-end JavaScript-based integration, which is very straightforward and can be done within a day. The alternative, the server-side implementation is another alternative, but that one does take a little bit more work, and we would have to more deeply understand your architecture and your tech stack, making sure all the data sources are playing nicely with one another. It's not that the implementation itself is difficult with server-side, it's just that it does take more time to make sure we properly architect these implementations. So we'll be heavily engaged with you to make sure that that is the case.
Okay, and then what is your advice for agencies that are helping their end clients set up A/B testing?
That's a great question. So in my experience, agencies are digital agencies that are focused on conversion rate optimization, different from advertising agencies, for example, are tasked with improving metrics, and that is the kind of key deliverable that they're responsible for helping their customers with. And because of that, A/B testing again has its limitations, and especially because your billable hours are so limited as an agency, and the more time you can help customers actually find value with fewer hours, the better off, the healthier your business is. A solution that's powered by reinforcement learning, like AMP.AI, becomes a really, really powerful tool for agencies. So rather than running just kind of slogging through many A/B tests to try to find the 1 or 2 out of 10 that will win, you can run a select few projects that are very strategic in nature, thereby freeing you up to ideate more and work with more strategic partners.
Okay, well, that's the last question we have from our audience today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar as a follow-up, so look for that in your email and feel free to share that with your colleagues. I want to thank Ash for hosting our webinar today. With that, I want to wish you all a good day.